Welcome to today's podcast interview. I brought on Aaron Trahan. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this conversation, Heather.
Yes, I'm stoked for another mindset coach, but you specifically are about performance mindset, which we're going to get into. Before we get started, please give listeners a little background. Where do you live and what do you do?
Yeah, so I am based here in Austin, Texas. I'm the founder of Performance Mindset Coaching. I work with what I refer to as emerging executive leaders, those that have a strong willingness, strong desire to put in the work, to take action, to reach whatever the next level looks like for them. So that can come in the form of startup CEOs and founders, as well as C-suite level, corporate executives that know that there's a next level and they're looking for the support on how to achieve it.
I guess another term I use for all that is high achievers, ambitious, driven individuals. And something you shared with me, I think this is fascinating because I know that there are, the 3% or whatever, but you specifically stated that like 98% of people are living in mediocrity, status quo, going through life's motions.
Yeah. I like to think about things in terms of what are your actions saying about your priorities? And it's very easy to say that we want better results. It's very easy to say that we want more success. And as a matter of fact, I think that's a pretty standard universal thing. As we were talking, I've yet for a professional to come up to me and say, Aaron, I don't want any improvements in my life. I don't want better results. I don't want to see better performance. So I think that that's an underlying thing is I think people want that, but so few people are actually putting in the work, actually living out the continuous improvements on a day in, day out basis to go to bed better than when they woke up and staying out of the dreaded comfort zone. That's why it's such that small minority is it does require you to be uncomfortable. Growth by design is not meant to feel good. It is meant to stretch you. It's meant to
Yeah.
take you on the outer edges of your capabilities. And a quote that I love is growth and comfort do not coexist. The sooner that we can all understand that, the better. Because as good as the comfort zone is going to kind of try to get you to stay in it with all the warm and fuzzy feelings, the one thing it will never admit to you is that there's no growth there.
You know what I'm thinking though, sitting here as you're sharing that, there's discomfort going through life's motions, wanting more, and there's discomfort growing and evolving. So either way, there's discomfort. Like you get to choose. And something I wrote down, a quote that I preach and I'm all about is like you can either evolve or revolve.
Yeah.
You have the choice. What do you believe, or in your experience in coaching, what are some of those key factors that are really, truly keeping people stuck,
Yeah.
revolving?
Yeah. So I think it's a couple things. And one that I see extremely often almost happens by accident. So when you look at leaders, when you look at professionals, we all want success and we're all working towards gaining greater experience. We want to feel like we're experienced in a particular area, a field, or a domain. There's also a downside to that success plus experience equation is once we actually have some achievements, our resume is starting to look pretty good. There's some milestones that were checked off. The money is rolling in. The titles are starting to look pretty good. We have experience now. We feel like we can maybe even train some other people. People are coming to us for advice. That is exactly when complacency starts to creep in. And one of the big things is just that is when complacency starts to creep in, you're looking in the rear view mirror about the things that you've already accomplished. You're feeling good about it. It is a natural tendency to kind of take your foot off the accelerator a little bit And as soon as you stop growing, I don't even have to finish the sentence. You know exactly what comes. If you're not growing, you're dying. And sometimes that's a long process. And people, without even realizing it, leave the growth zone and kind of get into that comfort zone just based off their own success. And
Mm.
I think, too, to kind of go along with that is, what I've seen is people continue to rise up the ranks in an industry, a company, or their field. They by default become a little bit more risk averse. They're less likely now to take risks. They almost have a greater fear of failure. There's more eyes on me. There's people watching. This could really hurt if I try this and fail. And so they almost start treating that failure like a fire they don't want to touch because they'll get burned. And so that fear of failure that's largely made up by the ego is like, I can't look bad. I can't look like a beginner. I can't look like I'm in
Yeah.
learning mode. I got to be the smartest one in the room, is another big killer of growth. And so I see that on both ends of the spectrum, is that getting comfortable, getting complacent, while at the same time feeling like you got it a little bit too good to take any risk at all. I just want to not rock the boat and just keep things status quo.
Okay, there's something I want to touch on that you were just talking about that I wrote down is failure. And a couple of years ago, I came across an acronym for FAIL, first attempt and learning. And again, something I share with you, like I'm not afraid to fail. I actually have learned to use failure, its mindset and resilience and overcoming adversity. As an example, I'm a runner. I love running.
Mm,
I think it was back in 2007. I decided to get out of my comfort zone and sign up for my first race. And at that time, I did a half marathon. Well, now I don't think it was failure, but I learned a lot. Number one, I didn't have a great training plan. I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. The
mhm.
longest run I ran was 8 miles the Monday before the race.
Yeah.
Not my best. So anyway, I finished the race, but I was in a lot of pain for weeks after, had to get some medical treatments and whatever because I didn't train well. But
Mhm.
guess what? That quote failure created my own mental blocks, fear around running and whatever. But the work that I do, I chose to overcome that by then signing up for a marathon. So
Mhm.
for me, I'm like, let's just double it. But guess what I learned this time? I got serious. I found a 5 month training plan. I reached out and talked to running coaches and I learned about nutrition and recovery. And that marathon was, even though it was 26.2 miles, it kind of felt like a cakewalk, but I trained for 5 months. So can we talk about how people can like learn to, I love the quote, let fear fuel you, not rule you, and how to like eat fear and failure for breakfast?
Yeah, yeah, that's so many different things to unpack off of your story, which I love. And when you think about failure and you think about how we're all grown up and all the lessons that we kind of learn starting at an early age, that failure is made out to be this big bad monster. It's just like stay away from it. Like make good grades, do good in
Yeah.
sports, win the games, even if it's get your participation trophy, whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
don't fail. We have to look like winners. And I think what's happened is we've got it all wrong, society speaking. And it's failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is a very key part on the journey of achieving success. And what I like about your story is, if we just fast forward back to the ending that you shared, if you didn't go through that pain, if you didn't go through that experience, if you didn't get that key learning along the way, you'd have never been in the position to recalibrate and optimize and generate the results that you did. So you show me someone who wins 100% of the time, I'll show you they're probably operating at a fraction of their full potential. They're not being
Yeah.
stressed. They're not learning a damn thing. Um, and so, yeah, I think failure is an absolutely critical component to the path towards achieving extraordinary results. And I kind of like to think about it as There is no better learning accelerator than experiencing some failure, experiencing some mistakes. Now, we still have to have the responsibility of being a great student
Right.
to stay aware and be clear of what those lessons were and apply them as quickly as possible. But avoiding failure is an absolutely guaranteed way of playing too small.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and a quick story to share there, just kind of about that, is I'm sure you've heard of the famous female soccer star Mia Hamm. She was a global icon in the 90s, really the first global female athlete. And I loved hearing an interview with her where someone asked, like, how did you get to this place? Like, how did you outperform your peers on such a level to get here? And her response was brilliant. She says, I lost and failed my entire life. And they're like, wait, what? You're a global icon. You're
Yeah.
considered one of the greatest female athletes of all time. And she realized at an early age that failure is a key part of growth. So what did she do? She was constantly playing in soccer leagues and games against boys, against other females, 2, 3, 4 years older than her. And so she wasn't shaken by the outcome of just a temporary loss or temporary setback. She was focused on the continuous improvement. And even if it shows up in the near term as, oh, a loss, I'm playing so far out of my league, so many people shy away from that. But those who really go out there and want to achieve growth know that that's how it unlocks higher and higher levels of skill and capability.
What I want to touch on, I want to understand your definition of performance mindset. And I think the big message here is I believe so many people are living far below their potential,
Mm.
just getting by, just getting through life. And like, we talked about in the pre-call, the biggest thing is regret in our older years. Or I think there's even, like the top 10 regrets of the dying is like not taking risk, not doing that thing, not saying I love you. So can we talk about growth mindset? Because I love how for you to share when you give speeches, people that
Mhm.
raise their hand. But now let's talk next level performance mindset and how people can tap into that.
Yeah, yeah. So to take a step back to really set this up, I kind of think about this in terms of what I refer to as the 70-20-10 mindset rule. And throughout my experience, to the rooms that I'm presenting in, to the teams that I talk to, my corporate experience, the 70-20-10 generally applies. So let's just first take the 20%. That's the easy one. These would be the ones that are just, you know, these are the status quo group. They'll openly admit to you that, look, I don't want change. I don't want to evolve. I'm not here to learn and develop. I'm just good with where I'm at. They're open and honest about that. But here's where it gets interesting. 70% of every room is going to raise their hand to the question of who identifies with a growth mindset. That belief that with the proper amount of time, energy, and effort, you can increase your skills, develop capabilities, enhance your intelligence, all the good stuff, overcome the obstacles. Everybody, the vast majority, wants to identify with that. But that leaves that remaining 10%. What's missing from that 70% group that the 10 percenters have? And it's that bias for action. The vast majority of people that raise their hand and say, I identify with a growth mindset, know how to say all the right things, know how to post all the right things, know how to make it sound like they're in growth mode. But if you were to zoom in on their habits, their routines, their actions, the challenges they're signing up for, they're in just as much of a status quo comfort zone as the other group. And so this 10% group that I kind of refer to as the performance mindset group, there's one big differentiator there, and it's that willingness and that bias for action. They've had just as much success as everybody else in that room, but they're not looking in the rearview mirror. They're not leaning on their resume. They're looking out the front windshield. They want to know what am I truly capable of? What more can I achieve? How can I improve? Even if that means staying outside of their comfort zone, being challenged, being stretched, being uncomfortable, kind of stumbling in public, kind of learning in public, so to speak. they're totally okay with that because they know that that's just the rent that's due to be in growth mode. Um, and so what really separates that is those who say they're growth oriented and those who act in a way that's growth oriented.
Okay, so a story, like a specific one that's coming to mind right now that I just remembered. I was at a Dr. Joe Dispenza event in the last year, and this woman was telling me, yeah, I've been wanting to start my podcast, and I put it off for a year, and now I'm hoping I can get it launched in like the next 6 months. And she's just telling this awful story, right? And all I can hear is self-doubt, procrastination, how we talk ourselves out of greatness. And so
You got
my blunt self, I was like, just get started. Just get started. You're going to suck when you get started, but just get started because how easy it is. I'll start in 6 months. January 1st, BHAGs, right? 8% of people, supposedly the stat is 8% of people actually reach their goals. And so in that woman's, all I said to her was, we were in like the middle of a month. And I said, let's say, because I don't remember the date, June 1st, just get started. Just launch your first one. Just publish it. Let it go. June 1st. Stop talking yourself out of it. So what
Mhm.
advice do you give people to just get started? Because, oh, you told me imperfect action.
That's right. Yeah, people spend their entire lives waiting on the quote unquote the perfect pitch, the
Yeah.
perfect time, the
Yeah.
perfect opportunity. Kind of going back to what you said, the I'm going to start on Monday. Anytime I hear someone say I'm going to start on Monday, I,
No, you're not.
I can't help myself but say you're going to fail. You're
Yeah.
going to fail. You're not going to reach whatever goal you're reaching is because that voice inside the comfort zone is winning to telling you to wait. If this is something you're truly wanting to do, you're committed to doing, you're ready to take action, start right now.
Yeah.
Start right now. Quit this conversation with me. Go start right now. Um, but the interesting thing that you said is people are so afraid to suck at something. It's almost they can't detach outcomes with identity. And so me sucking at something new is often translated as well, that's a fracture to my identity. I'm not good at this. It's almost a personal attribute from the short-term results. And back to the imperfect action is I think about really helping people understand the competence confidence loop. And the first place that starts is let's just gain a good, clear grasp of reality. And there are no perfect opportunities. The clouds will never part, and God Himself come down and say, now is the perfect time to start. Here's your green light. It
Yeah.
will never happen. So, what we have to do is really shift our perspective and change our relationship with failure and kind of thinking about any action we take on any new initiative, any big launch is going to have some degree of imperfection. So if we can get comfortable taking imperfect action, what happens on the other side of that fear and that uncertainty? Emotions always reward action. So what happens is we develop, even if it's a small increase, but we develop more competence in that area. With higher competence, what always follows is higher confidence. And as you start figuring this out, imperfect action leads to greater competence, increasing my confidence. It now makes it that much easier to take
Yeah.
more imperfect action. And
Yeah.
then so it's a flywheel that you can always have working in your favor if you do one thing. And it's taking that imperfect
Yeah.
action. The
Yeah.
one the kryptonite to this whole model is inaction. You'll never grow if you get trapped in a sense of inaction.
Yeah. I love that. Um, okay, something I circled. I want to hear your perspective. I um what's the word I'm trying to use? I study a lot around the idea of identity. The way Dr. Joe Dispenza explains it is that your personal reality is created by your personality, which is made up of how you think, act, and feel. And
Mhm.
as an example, something I do with my coaching clients is literally creating version 2.0. I think you even said something about it in your, like the intake form,
Mhm.
that what got you to where you're at isn't going to get you to where you want to go. Do you talk much about that idea of an identity shift, creating version 2.0? How do you word that?
Yeah, I kind of think that if we could think about this as, I mean, almost imagining taking out your iPhone and going to Google Maps. We're all looking for a route to the next level, to our next best version, to our full potential. Um, but to get there, we need two really critical data points. No different than what our GPS app's going to need is we need to understand exactly where we currently are.
Yeah.
Like what is our current version? Like we got to be brutally honest about that. Because if you start lying to yourself about where we're currently at, why we're currently here, and what's the good, the bad, and the ugly of that,
Yeah.
you that route to the next level is going to be filled with wrong turns and dead ends. But I think the other data point that we need is where do we want to go and why? What does our ideal state look like? And we have to understand, kind of to the quote that you were alluding to, is what got me here is not going to get me there. So if we want different results, we're going to have to change our approach to kind of what got us here
Yeah.
most of the time. And so creating that route, or kind of what I refer to as that transformation bridge, we've got to have those two areas. Where are we currently at? What does it look like? Where's our destination? Only then can we create an optimized route to get there. Because when you don't have a good clear grasp of where we currently are, where we're going, any path you take will work because it's not aimed at kind of where you ultimately want to see yourself. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting mapping that I all think we're all searching for of how do we get to that next best version of ourselves from our current version.
Mm.
But where kind of the percentages play is so many people don't want to do that deep work. We just get caught in the status quo and good enough, and things are nice and comfortable, and we never really strive to kind of reach that next level that we know that we're capable of.
What I heard from you there is really understanding you have to create clarity. And a lot of people come to me and they don't even know. And I found that it's because I had been chasing somebody else's dream, somebody else's definition of success. And you're right. Until I took inventory, this is my life. How do I want to live it? But here's my question for you, because I think it's so easy, especially messages out there: strategy, strategy, hustle, grind, make shit happen. And I completely disagree that when you do the internal work, because let me just share a personal example.
Yeah.
I spend many thousands of dollars on website, copy, tech, all the external things. But I was coming from a place of self doubt, imposter syndrome, procrastination. So it didn't matter how much money, strategy, structure, and effort I had, the internal blueprint, my set point, was never going to get me there. So do you
Mhm.
talk much about that?
Oh yeah, it's one of my most critical components to my approach and my method is you can't go very far without clarity. And I kind of like to say, if you're just chasing after things you don't really need or don't really want, you'll never have enough. And guess what? More is not a strategy. And so, where everything starts with me is a very strong foundation of awareness, because you can't enhance or improve something you're not aware of. And so once you kind of get that awareness, kind of back to that first initial data point, where are we currently at? Only then have you set the foundation to generate the clarity that you need to start building the route. So clarity is such an important thing, especially when it's true, authentic clarity, right? It's like your goal should not be determined based on how it's going to look to your external environment or on your Instagram feed or whatever else. it needs to be something that comes from within, that's authentic to you. And something I'd like to share with your audience is one of the tools and takeaways that I have that can really be applied right now, immediately after hearing this episode, that you can go and ask yourself these questions to generate alignment. Um, so it's three questions that I have my clients really go in deep, that we'll spend an hour on each one of these questions, just really making sure we bring it to the surface. But the first one is, how are you defining success for yourself?
Mm.
Not, you got to block out all the external noise, what it looks like in your external environment, associations, whatever it is. But when you look inside, what is success? How are you defining that for yourself? That's number one. Number two, let's go to the happiness side. What does happiness actually look like for you?
Yeah.
What is that ideal state? What does your average day look like when you can say you've reached your benchmark of being happy? And then number three, and this is where it all comes together, based off the deep work that you've done with how you define success and what happiness looks like, do an honest assessment if those two things are aligned with one another, or are they in conflict with one another. And you would be surprised with the high percentage of people who haven't gone through this thought work, that when going through it the first time, it's an oh shit moment of saying, wow, how I'm defining success, I would have given up all of the elements of how I'm defining happiness in hopes that whenever I achieve success, oh, then I'll be happy.
Mm.
Newsflash, I think you probably know this more than most.
Yeah.
It never happens that way. You
Yeah.
don't just magically find success at the top of the mountain. And so making sure that those two things are aligned is the single best way that I know how to always come back and help ensure that you've got clarity on what you're doing, why you're doing it. And when you've got a strong enough why, you'll always figure out how.
Even on that, Abraham Hicks says something to the effect of, you can't have a happy ending with an unhappy journey.
Ah, beautiful.
And that happiness is a choice. And I used to live that way. I call it conditional living. I was living conditionally. When I get in a relationship, then I'll be happy. When I make more money, then I'll feel abundant. When I have more success, then I'll feel, like I achieved something. And holy crap, that is a never ending target that you will never hit. And it's like, how can I be happy and content and grateful right now
Mhm.
and still strive and want to be my best self? So I think on that note, what we really are talking about is, for the majority of people who are living far beyond below their means, what can you offer them to, like, overcome fear and failure, but to step into their highest potential, because that's possible for them?
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's understanding the equation. And you mentioned a book title there that I want to kind of come back to and double click. One that had a profound impact on me. And when you zoom out and really think about this whole thing called life, what is it that we're doing here? Why are we doing what we're doing? And there's a great book. It's the top 5 regrets of the dying. And it's always a shocker of what the unanimous number one regret was of people in their last late stages of life. And it's looking back and having the biggest regret of knowing they never played at their full potential. They
Mm-hmm.
never lived their most true, authentic version of themselves. They settled, their goals became what was just accepted from their external environments or associations. And so I think it's so important to not let that happen. Almost kind of approach your day, approach your life like, what advice would my 80-year-old self give me today that I can minimize regret for that person whenever that day comes? Because mistakes and regret are two totally different things.
Yeah.
You can go out and try new things and have a misstep and have a mistake. You can learn from that. And as you mentioned in your brilliant story about, running, that was a key catalyst to recalibrating to go out and achieve great things. But inaction is where always you'll find the regret, that big bill that comes due when you don't, when you're out of time, you're out of energy, you're out of youth. Um, and so, yeah, I think when you can just kind of really dive in to understand your why, and then knowing that inaction is always gonna serve up that big bill later on in life of regret, and that's just not a way that you want to live. And so, um, if we could put this in perspective, it's almost kind of like imagining that your 80th birthday, all your friends, all your colleagues, everyone's around and they're toasting you. What do you want them to say? What do you want their words to be as a reflection of your life, what you stood for, what you did, what you achieved? Now imagine that that birthday party was happening tonight. What would those words be right here, right now? What would they be saying? And then where's the gap? Where's the variance? And then what specifically are you going to do about that variance starting right here, right now? And
Yeah.
if there's things that you need to act on and you're not acting, you should not be surprised if regret shows up later on in life.
Yeah. On that note, I love that idea. Are you familiar with Jesse Itzler?
Vaguely, yeah. I know who he is, but yeah, I can't say that I follow him super closely.
So I love Jesse Itzler. He's married to Sarah Blakely. So they're
Right.
both entrepreneurs. He's a serial entrepreneur, endurance athlete. I'm actually attending his Running Man festival in October. But
Nice, nice.
here's what I love about Jesse. Kind of a lot of these things we're saying, and to put it into perspective, let's just say, because we don't know our expiration date, that's what I call it. Let's just say you only have 12 years left. And so, how he says it is okay, that's only 12 more summers. Or if you visit your parents once a year, that's only 12 more visits. Like,
Right.
if you put this stuff into perspective, it is time to light a fire under your ass and stop sitting around. Something you shared with me on the idea of a performance mindset. It's about getting in the arena. So, we are trying to help you, the listeners, get out of the bleachers, get off the field, get into the arena of your life. What is like a final message you want to share with people to like wake them up?
My big challenge for the audience would be this: just for a second, completely change your definition of failure.
Mm.
What if instead of failure being not achieving or not living up to whatever it is you were trying, how different would your life be if your definition of failure became not trying? What would
Mhm.
change if just simply not trying was where the failure was defined? What more would you be doing? What more could you accomplish? What more levels could you achieve as tapping into your best version? And so, without even acting, just go through that mental exercise. What would happen? And you can even look back with some hindsight. How different would your life be if from the day you were born, you were just instilled with that definition that failure meant not trying? How different would your life look? And what immediately will you start doing differently under the guidance of that new definition?
I love that. And again, it's a perspective shift, which we all have access to. Here's what I want to know about you. What are some of your daily rituals and practices? Because you're human, I'm sure you fall off track too. What are you doing to stay forward focused, to talk yourself into greatness, to keep going?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, it all starts first thing in the morning. I am a super fan of a strong morning routine. I kind of think about this in terms of it's kind of my oxygen mask moment, right? We've all been on the planes, and what's the first instruction we get? Put your oxygen mask on first before you're able to help others. Why is life any different, especially when you're in a leadership role where other people depend on your guidance, your advice, your support? So for me, it all starts with a strong morning routine. One of my mentors is Robin Sharma, who
Oh,
he's the 5 a.m. club, and I can honestly say that concept has transformed my life. Whenever I implemented this, everything got better. My effectiveness, my mental cognition, my energy, my yeah. And so starting off the day with exercise, working out, so the physical work, the mindset work. And so I'm always going to be either listening to an audio book or a podcast, and then meditation. Those are my
Mm,
three non-negotiables on how I kind of start my day. If I take a day off, it'll probably be on a Sunday, but I've just kind of worked out a system within my life, or my wife, my kids, everybody around me knows
yeah.
this is my red line, my non-negotiable. And so I would say that's the thing for me. That's my oxygen mask that ensures that I give myself the best possible chance to show up and be on my game every single day.
I love that. And the reason I asked that question is I don't believe there's one right way to do it. I also love Robin Sharma and I love his books. They're like fables and great stories
Yeah.
with deep wisdom. But, the point is, high achievers and leaders were living intentionally and mindfully, which everybody can do in
Right.
whatever way that looks like for you. I love that.
Yeah.
So, here's what I want to know from a performance mindset coach. What is a key takeaway you want listeners to get?
The key takeaway is growth and comfort do not coexist.
Mm,
And sure, there's going to be some wise people out there. It's like, yeah, but what about this? What about this? Is once all the smoke clears, if you're serious about growing, if you are deeply committed to going to bed better every day than when you woke up, you simply have to embrace discomfort. There's no hack. There's no workaround. There's no magic formula. It's showing up in the arena, doing the work, being stretched, and living on the very outer edges of your current capabilities. So the absolute soonest that you come to grips with reality that growth and comfort do not coexist, the equation at which you build your life around becomes much easier. Are you going to choose comfort, or are you going to choose growth? Because you can't choose both.
ooh, I love that. I'm like neon flashing light. I love that. I'd love to wrap up the interview, so I have a few rapid fire questions.
Love it. Is there any rules? Do I have to keep it like one word, two words? Okay.
No, no rules.
All right.
What is a quote or motto that you live by?
A quote and motto that I live by, I literally think about every single day, is a 100 plus year old quote from Henry Ford. And that quote is, whether you think you can or think you can't, you'll always be right.
You know what I love about that? And even Napoleon Hill and all the OGs, everything those guys were saying, you know, century plus ago, nothing has changed today. It's
Yeah.
like these guys knew this stuff way back then, and even Einstein and all those greats. But I love that one. You're right, because mindset is everything. I love that. Thank you.
Everything.
What is a book you're currently reading or highly recommend?
The book that I'm currently reading is a new one by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, another strategic executive coach, that's been pretty eye-opening. And they make the point that going 10x is actually easier than just going 2x. And the concept behind that is, if you're just looking for kind of 2x improvements over the long term, you can maintain 80% of the things that you're currently doing. It's just, either more of this, longer time spent doing this. But when you think about the world in terms of 10x improvements, you've got to change everything. And you then have to laser focus in using the 80/20 principle. You can only focus on those 20% items and say no to everything else. So it forces you to get very clear on what moves the needle. And so it's just packed with wisdom. So 10x is easier than 2x is it's one that I would recommend.
That is new to me. I like that. All right, final question. What
Let's
advice
hear.
would you give your younger self?
What advice would I give my younger self? Inaction is a killer. If we're going to mess up, it's going to be from taking action and making a mistake from that action. If anybody in their 20s is listening to this, Inaction is the single worst thing that you can do, of letting some narrative prevent you from moving, taking action, generating results, creating, actually failing, which is a great learning accelerator. None of that happens. The experience isn't gained if
Yeah.
you stay inactive. So whatever you do, most especially as a younger person in your 20s, take the action you're most afraid to take. You'll always be rewarded.
And especially build that mindset muscle. But you know what? Even like 50, 60, whoever year olds,
Yeah,
you're not dead. Every moment's a fresh start. So it's not too late. What's that saying about the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago, the next best time now?
that's right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, life is all about gaining experience reps. Our lives are nothing more than one big learning cycle. And so
yeah,
ones that figure out how to accelerate that cycle through taking action and gaining the experience reps, it's no surprise why they come out ahead.
yeah,
There's no secret formula here.
yeah.
So especially if I could go back and grab my 20-year-old self, I would put the book from James Clear, Atomic Habits, in one hand, and the other hand, I would almost put a biohazard sign with inaction in it. And it's like, there is no substitute for taking action.
Yeah. I loved this conversation and such a great note to end on. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for having me.